Oh, hello. I see you've stumbled upon my humble home in Baltimore. It belonged to my late father, you know. It was quite nice, until a cousin of mine robbed me in the night, and everyone upkeeping it died. But what can you do? My name is Edgar Allan, if you haven't realized. Distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December that my mother prepared to give birth to me. I was born January 19th, 1809. Actually, I don't remember being born, but I take any opportunity I can to quote my own writing. A few years before I was born, my older brother had been born, and my little sister would be born a few years after. Within the 3 years of my birth, my parents died and left me with a wonderful mother, Frances Allan, and a deplorable father, John Allan. It wasn't that he was a bad person, really. He just wasn't a very parental person. He tried to raise me to be something I simply wasn't. From a young age, he tried to make me into a businessman. I had different ideas, judging from the poems I left on the back of Allan's ledger sheets. I would have compiled it into a book, but I was only 13, and my headmaster suggested to Allan that it was not a good idea. However, I had my mind and heart set on being a writer, like my childhood hero, Lord Byron, and I would soon act upon this dream. Soon did not mean right away. I attended the University of Virginia first. However, Allan had sent me with a fraction of the money I needed, so I left. I couldn't use all my furniture as firewood, after all. I went back to John and Frances Allan, but I was furious with Allan for humiliating me by not giving me the money I needed, so I left. I stormed out on a mission to become a published poet. When I was only 18, I published my first poetry compilation, Tamerlane. I then joined the army. After 2 years, I heard that Frances Allan was dying of tuberculosis. I didn't make it home in time to see her. And then there stole into my fancy, like a rich musical note, the thought of what sweet rest there must be in the grave. Alas, she was already buried, and the most I could do to remember her was temporarily reunite with Allan. He got me into the military academy, West Point. Before attending West Point, I published a second poetry compilation. A while after, I heard that John Allan, the only father I had ever known, had remarried without even informing me. I was highly offended and got myself thrown out of the academy, despite him. I then published yet another poetry compilation. It was at this time that I moved here, in this rather dingy shack. Being dead is far nicer than this. Of course, I didn't think so when I was alive. I was in fact full of relief that my aunt, Maria Clem, took me in here in Baltimore. While I was in Baltimore, John Allan died. I didn't bother with trying to reach his funeral. He was far beyond being forgiven, in my opinion, leaving me in poverty as he did. I was even left out of his will. As Allan never gave me money, I had to scrounge for it by publishing my short stories in a magazine called The Messenger. The Messenger soon became the most popular magazine in the area, not only because of my short stories, but because of my harsh book reviews. One of the writers I critiqued was Rufus Griswold. Rufus Griswold would continue my story after my death, but that's not for a few years. In the meantime, I married my 13-year-old cousin at the age of 27. I know how it sounds. I look back on it as something I'd rather not think about. But at the time, I was happy. 10 years later, tuberculosis, the disease that killed both my mother and brother, struck, and my wife, cousin, died. I was distraught and did not write for months afterward. Many people predicted my life would be short after that, and they were right. I only lived for 2 more years. During that time, I traveled giving lectures. I met Nancy Richard, who would become my closest friend. I attempted to court Sarah Helen Whitman, but alas, she did not hearken. A lover from the past appeared to be widowed, so I courted her. It was at this time that I took a trip to Philadelphia, stopped here in Baltimore, and disappeared for 5 days. I woke up in a bar and was sent to Washington College Hospital. That is where I spent the last days of my life. No one can be sure of the cause of my death, and I can take a secret through the grave. Some of you may realize this is a joke, because I am in fact dead and in the grave. This is where Rufus Griswold comes into play. He wrote a biography about me after my death, portraying me as a crazy drunkard. Hoping it would cause people to dismiss my writing, he had it published, but it instead caused the sales of my works to rise far beyond what they reached during my lifetime. Rufus Griswold made me into the legend I am remembered as today. I am an inspirational and heroic writer and critic to many, and to many others, nothing more than a drunken madman.
Who would like to question the drunken madman? Anybody? We got a question back there.
How did Lord Byron inspire you?
Well, he had a very successful career as a writer, and at the time, writing wasn't the highest money-making career. But I thought that if he, a British lord, could do it, then I, an American boy, certainly do it.
Yes, one question over here.
What do you consider your very best work?
Many people think The Raven would be my best work, but I personally believe Annabel Lee, it's my proudest, because it portrays the story of an actual friend and lover I had as a child.
Well, thank you. And if we could have